Order, order. The session is now in progress, or some such words. 5, 4, 3. Home Secretary, welcome. Apologies for the stifling heat in this room. I hope you can cope with that heat, plus the heat that may be generated from the questions from members of the committee. But we're absolutely delighted to see you. Thank you very much for coming with us. And without further ado, we're going to kick off with a nice opening question from Lord Tope.
Thank you. Thank you, Home Secretary. A good general one to start with. What do you see as the current challenges in your department, and what effect has the Defence Investment Plan had on your budget and your challenges?
Thank you very much for that. Let me deal with them in two parts then. So just broadly on the general challenges. I mean, look, it's the Home Office, so it is yes, by definition, I think, a challenging department. There's always a lot going on in our bit of the forest, as it were, and of course we've got big reform programmes underway across most of our areas of business, whether that's in migration or in policing, and then also in the broader homeland security space as well. Given that we've got the Southport Inquiry Phase 1 report with some legislation happening already on state threats and then more to follow. So there is just a lot on, and making sure that we keep track, that we monitor our performance and our delivery, and that we hold ourselves to account. You know, that is a big job of work in and of itself. I've spoken before about the fact that I wouldn't say the Home Office is fit for purpose yet, but I do think we're on a trajectory with the changes that were being made both by the previous Permanent Secretary, who's now the Cabinet Secretary, and also Gareth Davis, who's joined us as our current Perm Sec. So there's a programme of transformation for the Home Office itself, and how it functions, who does what the oversight looks like, and we've made some changes in that, which I'd be happy to talk to the committee about in more detail. So yes, both policy as well as transformation within the Home Office, I think, are very, very big pieces of work, which are inherently of a challenging nature. But, you know, I feel confident that we can deliver, and I think that the changes that have been made, both in terms of personnel, political direction, the combination of all of those, I think, puts us in a good stead. On money, and the Defence Investment Plan, like all departments, we've been asked to take a 1% cut in our capital budget. So that for this coming year, for 26-27 equates to £17 million, which sounds like a much smaller amount of money compared to other government departments which have much bigger capital budgets. I mean, our budget is for this year 1.7 billion. It will grow over the spending review period and then also the period that the Defence Investment Plan is covering. It's much smaller in comparison to other government departments. Many of you will be more familiar with some of those areas of spend because they've been the subject of scrutiny in both houses of Parliament before. So the Airwave programme, the Emergency Services Mobile Communications programme, that is a very mature programme, and that accounts for the biggest proportion of our capital spend. And then most of the rest of our capital spend is on clear departmental priorities on migration, borders, border security, asylum accommodation, and so on. I haven't yet made final decisions on where our contribution will come from. I would expect to be able to make up most of that from our work on estates and internal Home Office IT planning, but those are live conversations that are occurring as we speak.
I'm sure we're going to pursue more of that and various aspects as we go on. In short, they're not expecting any serious problems, budgetary problems, as a result of the defence change?
No, I hope not. I hope it's possible to manage the pressure in a way that doesn't impact on the key departmental priorities. It would be a non-starter to take money out of very mature programmes. You'd end up spending more money to get out of them than you would make any saving at all. So I feel confident for the sums that we're being expected to find that there will be a path to doing that, which will probably mean a deprioritisation of some of our estates work and some of our IT work as well, which is, those sorts of changes are never ideal, but of course it's part of a broader need to fill a budget requirement, obviously, in another very important Department of State.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll spend quite a bit of time looking at some of those issues that are priority areas for you, and we'll begin with policing. Lord Bark.
Secretary, I want to ask you about your response to the Police Leadership Commission report that was published only yesterday. How do you feel you will manage, the Home Office will incorporate the recommendations from this important report with the establishment of a new national police service, as well as fewer individual police forces? And the final part of the question is, how do you see trust in policing being restored? Does it need to be restored? And I speak as someone who was an elected police and crime commissioner, who was lucky enough to have an outstanding chief constable, who even today is much missed.
Right. So let me say firstly on the Police Leadership Commission's work. I was very, very grateful to Lord Blunkett and Lord Herbert and their commission panel members for the very in-depth, detailed piece of work that they have done. We had an oral statement yesterday in the Commons, which meant that the policing minister responded for myself and the wider government. We very much welcome all of their work. We will set out a more detailed response on all of the recommendations a little later in the year. I think we just need some time to digest some of those. I have had a good conversation with both Lords Blunkett and Lord Herbert about their recommendations, as well as other policing system leaders as well. The sort of broader reflections I would have are, I think it is a very necessary bit of work, and I think it's actually very timely given the reform programme that we've set out for the broader policing system, and that this very much fits with the direction of travel that we have set on a national police service, providing national leadership on these sorts of issues in the future. So I think actually there's a very neat joining up, not necessarily planned that way, because the review was commissioned before I was in post and before the policing reform programme was settled policy, with a bill obviously to follow later this year. But I see those things as very complementary, and also in the policing reform white paper we set out our expectations of where we want to go with public policy on the workforce, professionalisation of the workforce. I think that there is a happy sort of joining up of these two pieces of work, and we will certainly be looking to build that into our wider police reform programme. So I do think it sits well. Let me just say on the broader trust in policing, of course, which this report has focused on, but also is something that has been in public debate over the last few months, with some incidents, causing a lot of legitimate and understandable public debate. I think that, your average everyday police officers do their job, they run towards danger, they keep us safe as a country, and I wouldn't want a discussion about things that are not good enough in policing or where improvements are definitely needed, including on leadership and the work of this report, to do away from what we experience with a vast majority of not just rank and file police officers, but also police system leaders and chief constables and others as well. Clearly though, when incidents occur that are that cost public confidence, that suggest mistakes are being made in practice, in the way that rules are applied to people, whether that's videos on social media that suggest a particular approach is being taken to tweets and other material, or whether it's much more systemic, based on how officers have responded to an incident, as we've seen in the Novak murder. Those are instances which do, I think, legitimately raise issues of public confidence, and the reason for that is you've got to be able to trust your police. You've got to be able to trust that no matter where you are in this country, when you call 999 or you report something to the police, that your standard of service isn't going to be worse than somebody else's. And so I think that there are some questions, and certainly I've had things to say since I've been in post on non-crime hate incidents, the need for us to have a much more consistent approach to public order, and particularly the way that we apply our public order legislation. That's why Lord Ken MacDonald has been doing a review for the government. So where I think that there are areas of practice where there is enough inconsistency to be concerned or there's confusion, I have already sought to try to set public policy in a much stronger and clear direction, including by commissioning reviews, which I hope, once they've reported and we've responded, will again provide consistency and clarity in our framework. So I don't think we have a mass system problem, but we definitely have problems in the system and they definitely need fixing.
Thank you.
Yes, if I may, a supplementary on that. You're investing quite a lot of money on live facial recognition units for the police, and I know how useful they can be. You've also committed in the police reform bill to introducing clearer rules and independent oversight. Is there any more you can tell us about that regime? And in particular, is it only the police who are going to be regulated in their use of live facial recognition, or are there going to be constraints also on private sector users of that technology?
Thank you. We will be putting the legal framework that is developed through case law and the testing that we've seen in the courts already based on the police's common law powers and wider responsibilities on data protection and so on. We will be codifying that within the police reform bill because I think that in order to give confidence to the wider policing system, I think that is a necessary step, but also because I think you can then make sure you've got consistent application of the same rules. And I do think consistency and confidence in using the framework is necessary, although, as I say, the recent legal judgments have validated the case for its use at the moment. We are still nailing down the policy details, so forgive me if I don't give a précis as to what's going to be in the bill, but it will build on the consultation that took place and closed not long ago, where we received a lot of responses that focused on the need to have a framework that is capable of keeping up with changes in this area. I mean, the technology here is moving very quickly, so there is a need that was, I think a lot of the consultation responses focused on making sure that you've got robust rules that can hold and stand the test of time, as it were, in this space. There's definitely will be a need for a body to provide independent oversight. We think a single expert body in this area will be necessary as well, and then broader sort of transparency safeguards on top of that. So whilst I can't give you the exact policy design today, those are the areas that you would expect us to be looking at, which
perhaps
we are.
Just this, if you're a shop or a business and you're using this technology, are you going to be subject to regulation?
So again, not yet subject of a decision. There is already a framework here that applies on data protection and so on. So even if you're not a police force, there are other. It's not an unregulated or an unlawful space. Before we step into a wider application, I think that's something I'd like to consider in more detail. But the policy there is not yet settled, is all I will say for now.
Could you just explain why it's all taking so long? The consultation on this closed 5 months ago, and yet you're still unable to tell us what's actually going to happen. And just as an addition to that, given that you believe it is so important to have this new legislative underpinning of the use of LFR, why have you allowed so many different forms of extension, for example, from mobile LFR equipment to fixed LFR equipment, without having a proper legal underpinning?
Well, I mean, I do think there is a legal underpinning, and I think that the courts have found that the use of LFR, as it's been used by police
Home
forces,
Secretary,
is legal.
You yourself have said there needs to be a proper legal underpinning.
For reasons of clarity and consistency of practice across 43 forces, I think it's only something like 18 forces in total have made use of live facial recognition in some form or another. Of course, what the current use and what the current judgments have told us about use of LFR doesn't, of course, extend to potential future changes in this area of technology, which is why I think if you have a robust legal framework, it can have broader application in this area of tech. So I think there'd be a need for it, even if I said I didn't want to put anything related to this particular type of LFR on the statute book. I think I have a responsibility to try to preempt where some of this technology is heading and put those broader powers into one place, and also to make sure that there is an oversight mechanism, which, at the moment, there is not one single expert body that is overseeing this system. I think that to maintain public confidence, especially as more of it is used, that is an important thing. So I don't think, by the way, Lord Foster, given my experiences in government over the last 2 years, I don't think 5 months on from the closure of a consultation that had many responses is bad going, actually, because we are, I've already received advice and started to consider where my decisions will fall on the policy design, but there will be a policing reform bill later this year, and it will contain measures that relate to this. So I think actually in terms of from consultation to potential legislative change, that's a pretty good record, I would say.
People may question
may disagree.
that, but let's move on to one other aspect, if we can, of policing. Baroness Buscombe.
Are we moving to question 4 now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, Home Secretary, I haven't heard the word used by you yet in terms of police and police leadership, the word powers. My question relates to our rural towns and villages right across the UK, where now, quite frankly, a lot of us feel it's completely lawless. We have community support officers, but they have no powers of arrest, stop and search. They can't look into organised crime, which is rife right across the United Kingdom. We have established networks of county lines drugs. We try to make contact with our local police. We get nothing back. We're just told we're there to give them intelligence, but nothing happens when we give them intelligence. I know we've had the Operation Machinize, but has it actually targeted any rural areas? Because everything I've seen has just been around the inner cities.
Thank you for your question. I mean, I can deal with the specific issues around organised crime in rural areas if you'd like, or go broader. But if I may just say, just as a general principle, one of the aspects of the policing reform programme is a new three-tiered model for policing, looking forward into the future. And obviously, the National Police Service and indeed where we might land with regional strategic forces is the bit that's got lots of interest. And of course, Lord Hogan-Howe of your parish is doing an independent review into the right number of forces for that middle tier for me. But actually the thing that's got less interest, but to me is the absolute building block of policing going forward, is local policing areas. Again, without preempting where I think Bernard will get to in his review, I don't think we'll be a million miles away from saying local policing areas should be aligned to local authority boundaries. And I see that as the way of being able to make sure that your standard of service isn't different whether you're in an urban area or a rural area, because it's based on your local policing area, which will be the absolute bedrock of policing in this country going forward. There will still, I'm sure, be a need at strategic and at National Police Service level to make sure that we're thinking about the particular issues that you get in rural areas where you have smaller populations but spread over a bigger land footprint, and also you get very specific types of crime that target rural areas, for which I think obviously it's necessary to make sure we've got a tailored response. We already have our rural crime unit and a specific unit on wildlife crime as well that's run nationally. So there will still be a need for a national consideration of how we think about the issues that are very different in a rural area compared to the rest of the country. But the new building block will be local policing area, which I think will get rid of this sort of sense of disparity between different types of communities. And so that will pick up issues on coastal communities and others as well. On organised crime specifically, you mentioned Machinize, which I think it was an excellent National Crime Agency programme. I hope you'll have seen the government has decided to build on that with a national crackdown with £30 million of new money allocated to a national strategy to deal with exactly the kind of crime that you're describing, which is illegality on the high street. So whether that's mini-marts, vape shops, other outfits, of the kind that anyone who lives in these communities can tell there's probably something not great going on here, often with links to not just organised crime, usually not at the sort of drugs level, but at the organised immigration crime
It is
side
drugs
of
as
things.
well.
Yes, there is.
Are we watching it?
There is a bit of everything, and you'll pick up on any one of those raids. And I did one myself with police officers recently. Everything from illegal tobacco, illegal vapes, immigration infringements. Yes, there's lots of these businesses that are popping up in communities all over the country. That's what the national crackdown is about. We have allocated a specific sum of money to 3 forces in particular where we know that there is, based on intelligence, a stronger footprint for some of this criminality, but there is a national pot for all areas to bid into, and the National Crime Agency will still be doing their national crackdown work with every force in the country as well. So I would hope that the issues that you've seen in your community will be picked up that way as well.
Yeah, but I'm really worried because if it's about local authorities, that sort of model doesn't work because we know that organised crime is all about networks. It's not just the odd shop, this or that. It's actually networks that are embedded across different local authorities. So there has to be some sort of overarching approach. I mean, I was pleased that the government have accepted, in effect, an amendment which I won in the Crime and Policing Bill, to have much better closure orders, to give the police the chance to actually do the work that they need to do, but they have to be able to cross boundaries.
No, and that's why it was a national crime agency programme, so it was very national in nature, and it will continue to be. It is a national crackdown. What I was saying, forgive me, about on local authority areas was just to sort of make the case on the wider reform programme, just that I hear a lot of worry from colleagues legitimately about the position in relation to rural areas, given the specific challenges of policing rural areas compared to, urban city centres like my constituency. And there's always that concern about whether you can have a police service that is able to deal with the very local and the different sorts of communities we have, and then also do a good job nationally. Where I think we are at the moment is we have a police service that's neither local enough to deal with those local issues, nor is it national enough to be able to give a strategic overview of the system, and that is the gap that the reforms are designed to fill. So the National Police Service does the national work. Local police areas will be the bedrock of policing in the future. That will deal with our local issues, and in the middle you'll have much more strategic, larger forces that are able to do the specialist investigations and so on that we need. Can I just say one thing on the crackdown on high street illegality? One of the really important parts of the programme that we've launched is it's the police working alongside local authority enforcement officers, but also tax, HMRC are involved, as well as immigration enforcement as well. So it's a recognition that this is not one type of criminality. It's actually quite, it's quite, for entrepreneurial criminals, it's well designed to be able to slip through lots of different nets at the same time. And so we are deliberately choosing to fund work for immigration enforcement and for HMRC because we know that it's a multifaceted problem.
Can I just say too,
yes,
that could we make sure that the local community police officers understand what is going on around them? Because my local police lady who's just retired hadn't realised after 20 years of being in the village, hadn't a clue of what was going on, but it's before our eyes every night and every day.
Well, please do write to me with specific details as well so I can follow up.
Not my village,
no,
but it's an example.
So let me say something about the broad... what we've already rolled out is the government's reforms on neighbourhood policing and the neighbourhood policing pledge, having a named contactable officer in every neighbourhood in the country. I'm always keen to hear from the coalface experiences where that's not working as it should, and I've also got my officials and others within the policing system to test that these pledges, once made and told that they're delivered, are in fact being delivered not just once but consistently. So please do let me know if you think that's not the experience. But yes, I think this is one of those areas. By the way, thank you for your work on the amendment. You'll know that our intention is to go from 6 months to 12. We've done the quick consultation that was required of us in the recent act, and we will move very quickly here. I think that will make a difference. I think that's why bringing different agencies together is really important, because I think if you are a neighbourhood officer, it's not immediately obvious. You're not there to do immigration enforcement. You might pass something nothing on it, feel like nothing has happened. You might have some concerns about, dodgy tax dealings, but again, it's not in your remit, and so you're going to move on to something else, which is why I think the national crackdown with all of the different agencies involved is a really important step forward. So I hope you will see change
I feel encouraged.
in communities all over the country.
I'm sure Baroness Buscombe will be beating a path to your door to take this further.
No, I'm very encouraged by
good.
what the Home Secretary has
there
said.
you are. You've cheered one of the members of the committee up. But underpinning...
Important area, actually.
It's really
important.
It
does affect public confidence in local communities.
And underpinning the question was that people who live in rural areas, and I declare an interest as one, believe that policing does tend to be centralised and focused and real attention given to the urban areas. Is it not true that currently, if you look at police funding, there is less funding per head in rural areas who have much more expenses because of longer distance to travel and so on, compared to the funding per head in urban areas? And if you are going to focus the third tier of your policing structure on local authority areas, will you ensure that there is a fair funding settlement so that policing in rural areas are funded at least as well as those in urban areas?
What we've committed to is to make sure that, as the reforms are rolled out, there will have to be a review of the funding formula, because the structure of policing will be very different in the future. And so that is a necessity that will have to be considered properly. What I was saying about the building blocks is, and again, I don't think it's helpful to do a sort of, crime is lower in some rural areas, or the experience of crime or the perception of crime is up or down, because these numbers change. And actually what I don't want people to think is I'm not taking seriously that sense of not being treated fairly. I very much am. I think just structurally a new organising principle for policing that is based around local police areas actually helps to eliminate that sense of unfairness, and means that at your very local level you are able to take account properly of the type of community that you are policing. So, that would be on, very large areas that have to be covered and require more travel.
That confidence will only come if people in rural areas see that they're getting adequate levels of policing, and are not saying that happens in urban areas but doesn't happen in rural areas.
And so it will be important, therefore, obviously, I think, to make sure that, as the reforms are rolled out, the LPAs are functioning well, people understand who their local force is, and then again, this is to be settled once Lord Hogan-Howe does his report. We will make policy decisions in this area, but the intention with a smaller number of larger regional and strategic forces is there are some activities of policing that are where your outcomes for public protection are better at scale. So this is why I talk about specialist investigations in that middle tier, or the ability to do surge policing when you have public order incidents. Very hard to do at small force level without having to rely on mutual aid. Much easier to do when you've got a bigger force. So we're trying to strike the right balance between a local police service that can, give confidence to communities that shoplifters or prolific offenders who've got a drug habit, for example, aren't allowed to run amok, with no one really paying a huge amount of attention to them. And then at a national police service level, being able to give confidence to the system that there is some grip on the strategy for dealing with very serious organised crime, counter-terror challenges, the broader national picture. And then in the middle, you've got those specialist investigations, public order, and other work as well, regional organised crime. So I think it's just making sure that the structure can deliver a system that gives us a police service that is fit for the modern world, that can keep pace with all of the challenges and the new ways in which criminals behave, but can give confidence at the local level that you know who your local cops are and what they're supposed to do for you. And that helps a Home Secretary know that at national level there is that strategic leadership of the system that is very much needed. I think as a country we've done a really good job of taking an irrational model of 43 differently sized forces doing things 43 different ways, and have layered onto it national capability, policies and mutual aid arrangements and sort of ad hoc fixes to problems to get through. That is not the vision I have for how we do public protection in this country, and I do think we deserve better.
Let's hope that one of our committee members not with us today, Lord Hogan Howe, is in complete agreement with you as he comes up with his plans. Could I just say, and this may sound incredibly trivial, but I am going to say it, this committee produced a report on what you have described as shoplifting. We were very clear that the use of shoplifting diminishes how serious it is. We were delighted that the Prime Minister now always calls it shop theft, and it would be helpful if you as Home Secretary could do the same.
Yes, forgive me, that was an inadvertent slip of the tongue. But as a child, someone who grew up in a corner shop and whose first job was serving customers in my parents' corner shop, and having watched people steal stuff from our corner shop, I have very strong views about all things related to shop theft.
Excellent.
And the seriousness with which it should be treated.
Thank you. Baroness Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Home Secretary, hello. I want to ask you about violence against women and girls and the government's approach to that, and my colleague, Baroness Burton, will follow with a supplementary a bit later on about a particular aspect of that. Obviously, in the last year or so, we've had the Safer Streets mission and also yet another strategy in relation to violence against women and girls, and those are key priorities apparently for the government. Can I start off by asking you, can you tell us what progress has been made in achieving those reductions in incidences of violence against women and girls?
Thank you very much. So I think it's a little early on the actual measure that's been adopted for. So the government has a landmark pledge on halving the levels of violence against women and girls over the course of a decade. The way that's being measured in terms of how to think about progress is on the
ONS. Is this the ONS measure?
No, it's on the Crime Survey of England and Wales, and it's the prevalence of the proportion of people over 16 who've experienced any of either domestic abuse, sexual assault, or I think it's stalking over the previous 12-month period. That's a measure that we've adopted to give us a sense of whether we are making progress against that pledge. I think it's a little early to draw any conclusions. I think the first set of data suggests a very small decrease, but not to be statistically significant in any way. I don't think it's only a few 0.something% down. Where we would expect to make progress on that measure, though, over the rest of this Parliament, and then, all being well, into the next, or for a future government to think about. Where we have made more progress is on delivery of our manifesto commitments to tackle violence against women and girls, and this has been a cross-government effort. So this is it's a Home Office lead, but there's been a huge amount of work done in the Ministry of Justice, work with colleagues in education, and in health as well. So there is good delivery of the very specific manifesto commitments that were made, whether that's on stalking protection orders, domestic abuse protection orders, as well as notices, other specific legislative measures that we committed to. What I would say in terms of the approach taken by us at the Home Office, we've put a lot of our, if you're placing a few big bets, I guess, is a way to think about it. Where do you think you can make the biggest difference very quickly for women and girls? We focus quite a bit of our effort on the protection space, so current victims of violence, and that's where the new protective orders regime comes in. Something like 1,000 women are being protected much more strongly with the new DAPOs regime, for example. We focus quite a bit of effort on perpetrators and the DRIVE programme specifically in order to encourage these individuals to change their behaviour, turn their lives around, and to prevent more victims being created in the future. And then, given how concerned myself and others have been around the ever younger age group that we're seeing for nude images and in that kind of child sexual abuse space, where the age of perpetrators is dropping in a really quite horrifying way, we've decided to go big on efforts with technology companies and on device level controls, which again we see the announcement we recently made on device level controls as a way of having one big change that we think can decrease both the number of victims but also effectively child perpetrators as well.
Thank you. I think that combined measure you referred to of domestic abuse, sexual abuse and stalking was developed actually by ONS, and they use the crime survey data, as you say, to develop that measure. It doesn't include any online abuse, and I think that's something we will take up with you. I just wondered about, though, how effective you feel the Home Office is at progressing this strategy, because the ability of the Home Office to get buy-in from other departments has been criticised by the Public Accounts Committee, and I think there's a lot we can see in terms of implementation, but in terms of actual progress, say this is the 4th strategy since 2010. We've had a plethora of strategies, but not actually very much impact on the incidence of violence that women and girls is experiencing. So do you have any concerns at all about the ability of the Home Office to really be strong in this territory and to push the progress that's needed?
Yes, I mean, look, I would say that the difference between previous approaches and this government's approaches, it's not just a cross-government effort. Home Office has come up with this itself and has gone off to work out whether we can get any of the other government departments to take an interest. I mean, all of the work on the government's commitment and then the strategy that now underpins it has been led by the Prime Minister. And so it is the Prime Minister who has convened government departments, and it is the Prime Minister and his own office that have been in discussion with government departments about the things that they will do in their areas in order to have a meaningful impact, exactly as you say, on the scourge of violence against women and girls. So I can't speak for previous strategies or previous government approaches. What I can say for what this government is doing, this has not just come from either myself as Home Secretary or my predecessor in this job. It has come from the Prime Minister himself, and I don't think that will change.
Just 2 months ago, Jess Phillips resigned, citing the lack of progress in reducing violence against women and girls and the lack of progress in implementing the strategy. And as you know, she expressed her frustration at the lack of action and progress across government. The Public Accounts Committee has, as I say, questioned the ability of the Home Office, notwithstanding who's leading it, to get buy-in from other departments. So, there have been other commentators who take a different view of whether this really is, in terms of implementation, a cross-government strategy.
Look, I mean, Jess Phillips was a minister in my team, is also a personal friend and somebody who's a constituency neighbour, and I have nothing but the highest regard for her work, her specialism and her expertise in this area, and the very unique way in which Jess was able to push to get this to be the kind of priority it needs to be. And I think she did a great job. And, that is work that needs to be built on by all of us. I'm not going to get into the wider context of what's happened with the Labour Party and, the Prime Minister's own position. But what I can assure the committee is we have a very clear sense of what as a Home Office, what our contribution is to delivering this strategy and to making sure that women and girls in our country are safer. And of the things that I know Jess was very concerned about having not made enough progress on, not too long ago, though sadly after her resignation, we were able to make the announcement on device level controls, and that would not have happened without her personally putting in quite the effort that she did. It is always difficult trying to make one thing a priority for every government department. I used to be on the Public Accounts Committee, so I do understand the unique perspective that committee brings to things, and they will have seen a lot of this before, I'm sure. But what I can speak to is we have a landmark commitment out there. We expect to be held to account on it, and I welcome that scrutiny in making sure that not only is the Home Office making progress, but other government departments are as well.
Thank you. I think my colleague Baroness.
Yeah, if we could just carry on the sort of online VOG space, because I think it's obvious if you are a government that is really serious about trying to reduce violence against women and girls, the online space is where it's at. And, you know, we've certainly made some progress in that area. I'm not going to, shy away from that and congratulate the government in that sense. But so, for example, on specifics around upgrading laws around pornography, that's great to do that, and we're all delighted with that, but will it be enforced? I mean, it seems, outrageous also that blatantly illegal behaviour, for example, chat forums, chat discussions, semi-regulated chat rooms where there is discussions and toolkits on how to drug and rape your wife. You know, if that was a sort of conversation about how are you going to make a bomb, that would be closed down immediately, and there would be a global effort, by the way, to close those kinds of things down. And it just feels to me that the sort of online, recurrent, terrible sort of content that actively encourages violence against women, we sort of still look away and we just don't do enough. And I think a specific point on that is around tech. And we know, I've spoken to lots of private firms, lots of people who really understand what they're talking about on this. If the government was really serious about spearheading technology to properly sort of get a lot of this stuff down, we could do it and we could be global leaders. Yeah. And so I sort of wanted to kick off with that and perhaps have one supplementary as well, if I may.
I agree with you that the online space is where it's at in terms of the enablement of much more mass offending and offending that takes place across national boundaries. I think that is definitely a new feature of the well, it's not new anymore, but this new tech environment that we've been living in for the last decade or so. And I think that that has got to sit alongside a broader government approach, I think, on what the future of the online safety world looks like. So I think that absolutely violence against women and girls is one part of that picture, but there are broader concerns in that online space, which I would agree with you, demand a new kind of policy response. I think on what I am directly responsible for, I would hope that my willingness, the sort of Home Office willingness to look at device level controls, it's a statement of intent. It's not just about, of course, it's primarily about nudity and the ability of children to see nude images on their phone or to create nude images on their phone. We already know the tech companies can aid verify and do so in other ways. It isn't a stretch for them. It's a perfectly fair bit of regulation to require of them. If they don't act, we will legislate to make that the new norm. I would say that that is a statement of intent for how seriously we take the tech environment and our willingness to intervene in order to make it a safer space. I think it's a reasonable place to start with children, just because the number of perpetrators who are now children. I mean, children become sort of almost accidental sex offenders before they even know what sex is. That is a big societal problem. So I think that is the right place to start. But I would agree with you, that can't be the end of our progress here. We are going to have to think much more carefully about policy design. I think that is to go to the previous question, from Baroness Hughes, that is the cross-government bit of work that I think probably needs much more creativity, because that is where the emerging practice is moving very quickly, and we feel like it's a struggle for governments around the world to keep up.
Well, and I also think it's creativity, but there are some, to your point earlier, there are some things that you can do quite quickly that can make a big difference. For example, my team quite recently Googled rape porn, and they found, not behind an age-verified system, a website dedicated to rape porn. Now, that's illegal. Depictions of rape has been illegal for a long time. So that site, as far as I'm concerned, is an illegal site. How can that be right that a search company like Google is allowing that to come up on the front page? So it's sort of, it's the law is already there. So I would just urge you to really sort of work with other departments to make these changes very, very quickly. And I think perhaps we are getting to a place where there should be some kind of duty to report on tech companies with vis-a-vis violence against women and girls. Because, then suddenly the executives sitting around the board table will think, crikey, I've got to worry about this a lot more than, frankly, I am at the moment.
Yeah. Look, what I would say to you on this, this is not the first time the duty to report has been raised with me. I think we will need a new suite of policy responses in this area, and I personally believe that myself. So, the more in-depth work here, I think, now and into the future will be in this space. On enforcement, let me write to you, because I think there is some work that we've already started doing on enforcement, but obviously it's not going anywhere near fast enough. And that is always my sort of actual concern, that the legislation bit is the easy bit of the spectrum, and it's how you get the actual enforcement, because that's the only way that you change behaviours. But I happy to write to you about where I can see more progress on that. I've got
a few views that I won't bore everyone
Yes,
with.
And just also offer that broader dialogue, because of course I really value the work that you've done here, and I know we've got some commitments that we have to fulfil where there is engagement between our officials and your team on your porn review and getting to parity, which is obviously important. And I'm happy to fold in a conversation there about enforcement as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Baroness Berridge.
Thank you, Lord Chair, and thank you, Home Secretary. Talking about enforcement, obviously in the domestic situation, when we do need to prosecute, there's the introduction of control and coercive behaviour. Now, I had cause to come across your statutory guidance of 91 pages on coercion and control in the context actually of the assisted dying law, where that was a big part of the issue in introducing maybe an offence of pressure. And in the context of doing research on that, it became, it was reported to me that there are potentially problems from like lawyers and part-time judges in actually getting the prosecution, so it's a policing and inter-justice issue, because the control and coercive behaviour guidance is so detailed and it's not properly understood. So is that something you have come across? Because we do need to make sure that when we need to prosecute, and they're just struggling with the complexity of being able to investigate and advise and prosecute on that.
I'm afraid that's never been raised with me. In fact, the opposite, in the sense of both when I was in my previous role over at the Ministry of Justice and here, my impression from what I heard was that it's new, but it's working well. So if that is not the case, I'm very much welcome hearing from you, and maybe if you write to me, then I can go off and test your findings against what might have been asserted to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Where are we going? Oh, Lord Morris.
Good afternoon, Home Secretary, and thanks for taking our questions, allowing me to drink my Diet Coke. I don't know about other people, but it's a hot one today. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about the fairer pathway to settlement proposals, if I may. Now, the committee looked at that in detail, and there are different views on it. I'll just say at the outset. But what there isn't a different view on is that they are really significant changes. I mean, you've got big delays, unprecedented delays to settlement, retrospectivity, knock-on effects to issues like child citizenship, and so on and so on. So they're quite substantial. So I wanted to ask you a very basic question about the justification for the proposals. To be helpful, you told the Commons Home Affairs Committee in February, and you've said it very clearly, to be fair, that the reforms to ILR are precipitated by the scale of recent migration to the UK. I get it, so I'm not being naive, I understand that, and you have been clear and unambiguous. But I wanted to ask you why you introduced in March this idea that without the changes, so this is another justification for dealing with ILR people, that without the changes there would be a 10 billion drain on our public finances, and you talked about the use of public services, which ironically many of these people provide in adult social care at NHS. Their friends and neighbours, they don't claim benefits in the same way as other cohorts in the UK. So what I wanted to ask is that a good way of talking about these people when the figures that you rely on yourself, the MAC figures, indicate a net positive economic contribution for at least the next 20 years, the kinds of figures you're talking about, again, to be slightly helpful, pensions and so on, are not going to be affected by these delays. These are working age benefits, working people. who are not claiming benefits on the whole. So going forward to the consultation, will you remove that idea and stick to the numbers, I guess? But they are anxious, and what would be your response to that?
Well, look, firstly, I think indefinite leave to remain is a lifelong benefit. It isn't a short-term benefit or a status that you receive for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or until you become a pensioner. It is a lifelong benefit. In the sense that once you receive indefinite leave to remain, you may permanently remain in the country for the rest of your life. Whether you choose then to become a citizen or not is a personal matter, and people make their own choices on that. I don't think it's unreasonable to look at a lifetime cost of a status that is conferred for a lifetime. So I would just challenge that underlying assumption there. And I think on this debate, I think, look, it's contested and there will always be strong views, but I tend to think on these things it's better to stick to the numbers and the facts. So as I say, this is a lifelong status, not a temporary one, and therefore looking at lifetime cost, I think, is perfectly reasonable. I also think that given what we have seen over the last few years, this is a pattern of migration into the country that we have never seen ever before in our history. There is no other comparable number or type of migration that has occurred here. When people like my granddad came to the country, net migration was bumbling along at something like 50 or 60,000 a year. And in the last few years, the numbers have approached almost 1 million. This is a scale of change we've never seen before. The other thing that I think is unique to this cohort that does demand a public answer, a public policy consideration, is we've also never dropped skills requirements in quite this way with this sort of number ever before. So it had been the case before the so-called Boris wave that the skills requirements were RQF grade 6 and above, which is a sort of proxy for skilled workers. That was dropped to below RQF level 6, and that is also accounts for a very large number of not just visa holders that have arrived from different parts of the world, but also the very large number of dependents that have arrived as well. And what I would say is, look, when you're in a position where you know that the policy environment was unlike anything we've seen before. The skills requirements of people were unlike anything that we've seen before, and at those numbers that we've not seen before. And when you know that 1 in 30 people presently today in the UK arrived in the last 4 years, that does demand some public policy consideration at the very least. I mean, if you care as much about integration as I do, there is a question there about numbers and the ability to integrate such very large numbers as well, and I think those are important questions to interrogate. So it's perfectly fair for people who have a different view to say, I don't think you should change anything here. And that is a position that I think is, it's fair and legitimate, and this is a contested debate and people are entitled to take their positions on it. But you do have to also accept that as a matter of public policy, there will be costs and consequences to the do-nothing environment as much as there would be to the environment in which you say we're going to have to take some action as well. So what I don't think is possible is to just pretend that this massive change hasn't happened. I also don't think it's possible to just say, well, it happened under the previous government, let's just write it off, it's history, let's move on, because the consequences of that will be felt for many years to come. I think, look, every bit of public polling, every discussion I've ever done on this is a change people have noticed. So people in different types of communities all over the country have noticed this change. And again, I think if you're going to say that we don't want to do anything here or deal with any of the public policy questions that arise from this cohort of migrants, then you have to answer a set of questions for how you're going to deal with those pressures as well. So I think it's fair looking at a status that is conferred for a lifetime, that you do consider the lifetime cost. I don't think it's not an indictment of anybody. It's just a recognition of what that status is. And by the way, it is the position of this government that we respect indefinite leave to remain. Unlike other political parties, we would never propose ripping up indefinite leave to remain of people that have made their homes here and who have that settled status in this country. So there are clear parameters for what we're doing and why we're doing it.
May I? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to inflate the two things. I was very careful to say that we saw a spike in numbers under the last government. You've been very clear about that. Numbers are now coming down prior to your response to this on ILR, by the way. So numbers are plummeting, but...
They've changed as a result of the policy environment changing. So
Sure.
primarily the closure of the route for care workers. So there's
Allow
no
me
more...
to give you credit.
No, there's no more overseas recruitment, and family reunification is
Yeah.
paused. So
Yeah.
there are changes already.
Not this policy, so numbers are already going down. And I was very careful to say that, you know, you had a numbers issue. But I wouldn't want to conflate the two things, because you didn't say the 10 billion was a lifetime benefit. I mean, it is a kind of conflagration of different fiscal strands to make this 10 billion. What I'm trying to get at, given that you don't save any money through this delay for the benefits, but that's what was said, is that I'm afraid there is a lot of anxiety. ILR people are our friends and neighbours. They make money for this country. They work in adult social care. They work in the NHS. They provide the public services. They don't drain public services. Now, the point about that is, if you compare them to other bits of the British population, they are so economically active that it's a surprise to them that they might be in the firing line. Now, you said the government respects them. So I'll just put this question to you. If you respect them, then you have to, first of all, tell the economic truth about what they do. Secondly, just be aware, and you are aware, because this is why this policy exists, that at least one political party has the stated aim of removing, as you know, many or all of people from this country who are on ILR. That's their policy. So if you say to that future government, potentially, hypothetically, by the way, they drain public benefits, they are of no benefit to this country, which is what was said, then surely that is a problem, and it's a long-term problem. Instead of sticking to the point that for the next 20 years, and by the way, they will not be a negative until after 40 years. I mean, this is all in the public domain, by the way, so, you know, we have to be very clear about it. So my question to you would be, supplementary, I know I've gone too long, is going forward, when you respond to the consultation, will you exercise some care in what the justifications are? Because these people are afraid. They're afraid of us, this government, sorry, not us, member of the committee, this government, and they're afraid of what potentially might come next, removal or deportation, and that is a real fear. So I think it's a serious issue, and will you modify what you say about their contribution, which I think is a positive contribution for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, look, I don't accept that I've said anything that requires modification or apology. The issue on the 10 billion, which is from Migration Advisory Committee numbers, I mean, look, I made a speech, I used that number. In fact, a Liberal Democrat member of Parliament in the Commons chose to challenge that. The ONS found that I had used accurate numbers, and in fact, we had an explanatory note with my speech that was published on gov.uk that explained the number and how it was being used, and that was a good example of good communication of statistics by the government. So, you know, I feel like that side of this debate has actually been excavated in other ways, and I have used the number accurately to describe what is an accurate position in relation to the lifetime costs of a lifetime status. What I would say is, you know, we will be able to talk more about some of these numbers once we're able to publish the results of the consultation, the analysis, and also the impact assessments once policy is settled. But you are dealing with very different cohorts to the types of cohorts that we've had for work visas in the past. And there will be different behavioural changes in this cohort than there have been before as well. So I think some of what you're driving at will be answered later in the year when we respond to the consultation and settle policy in this area. But let me just zone out for a moment and just address that broader point on the signal sent to people who are already in this country, if I might phrase it that way. Firstly, I don't really have any truck with the argument that says because another party is about to do something extreme, that means that you should then change how you are dealing with an issue. This is a legitimate area of public concern, and I think that a plurality of people across the country would say it's a legitimate area of public concern. It is the job of the government to consider, therefore, how we respond to it. But, I believe in running a good system of economic migration. My own parents were economic migrants to this country. There was a set of rules. They played by those rules. They are citizens. They've raised 4 British children in this country. But a system of economic migration does have to be well managed, and you do have to be able to pull levers to manage that system if things don't play out the way you think they will. And in that regard, I don't think we're doing anything unique. What's unique about this cohort is the sheer number of people that we're talking about. What is not unique is that the British government or the Home Office is seeking to think about the routes that are available into the country and change some of the rules that apply to those routes. That basically happens all of the time. And it's not unique to us. It happens in every country in the world, including lots of the countries that British citizens go to work in, who regularly change their rules as well. The thing that is striking with this cohort is the sheer numbers that we're dealing with. But those are numbers that were never planned for. And again, I do think if you have an inbound number of people that is far outside what you planned for or expected, again, it does demand a public policy response, and then you do have to explain the consequences of those choices.
Just one last word,
Very quickly.
Well, I too am an economic migrant. My parents came in exactly the same way as yours did. The issue is that going forward is to kind of understand that the sins of the past, those inflated numbers, are not the fault of people currently in the cohort of ILR. They are deeply anxious, and then doing a blanket policy with retrospectivity in it, by the way, is not going to help. I mean, you're already bringing the numbers down, and I think you should get credit for that. But to be careful of having a blanket policy on ILR, which is sending a message to them, I think that's the important point.
I don't accept, by the way, that this is retrospectivity in the usual understood way of things. It has been settled case law for some years that the rules that apply to an application, the immigration rules that apply, are the rules in force at the point of the application, not at point of arrival in the country. It has been settled law for some time. I think if a government wasn't allowed to pull a lever to impact on people currently in the system, that would be a very big change and would drive a coach and horses through a government's legitimate ability to control the border. So I think what I've been saying to colleagues who have concerns in this area, of course, we're consulting on transitional arrangements, and that's we've received a lot of consultation responses on what the transitional arrangements should look like. What you're not asking for is no retrospectivity. What you're saying is have an exemption or special treatment to particular cohorts of people that are in the system at the moment, which is fair enough, because governments also sometimes provide exemptions or bespoke new routes as well, and we received consultation responses on all of those, but I don't accept the retrospectivity point, because that would fly in the face of settled case law in this area that has tested what it means to have both a legitimate expectation and also what a government's powers are when it comes to changing immigration rules and how they should be considered, and I believe we are in compliance with all of our legal obligations.
Home Secretary, sorry, just so we can pick up on this reference you've made to retrospection, and I acknowledge before I bring in a number of colleagues who want to pick in here. I mean, you've already made a special case for prison officers back in December because you knew that because many of them were below RFQ 6, they would not be able to be on the normal route, and they might well leave, and there was deemed to be a potential staffing crisis. So you've already made exceptions, and obviously we know that the NHS are pushing you because they're concerned about 12,000 staff and so on. But there is a principle. Lord Bark.
Yeah, forgive me coming back to this, Home Secretary, but as you said at the start, a number of people have very different views on this. And I'll start with I'm very quick, but I just want to say the problem that there was, and it was a grave problem and outrageous in many ways, I think, has gone. That's finished. We're now in a position, as has already been said, where net migration is coming down and coming down fast, and there's no reason to believe that that won't continue to be the position. And a great credit is due to this government for that, and maybe some to the end of the last government as well. In those circumstances, and as it were, one lawyer speaking to a much better lawyer, in you know, I'm not being unduly modest, I'm saying this, it's not a field I worked in. It just seems unfair and really against the rule of law that people who came into this country on one basis with the view that within 5 years, provided they behaved themselves, provided they got work if they could, and the rest of it, they would then be entitled to ILR. For that to change does seem to me to be something that only in the most extreme circumstances, and because numbers are coming down now, it does seem particularly unfair on them. And it's on that simple basis that I'm glad that no decision has been taken yet, and I appreciate that. I very much hope that can be put in the balance when a decision is taken.
Look, all of these, all aspects of the policy are yet to be settled. So the point, this has not been a fake consultation exercise where the government already knows all of the policy and is just sort of looking like we ask for views. I mean, there will be lots of transition arrangements, by the way, that haven't had a lot of airtime and debate publicly on spouses, on older household members, on whether you look at household income or individual income, and of course the policy on children remains to be settled. So this is a proper piece of work. And I think it is the largest number of responses any consultation has had, or certainly has had in recent years. So, I can't say any more than reiterate that point. I just must leave aside all of the individual views, and I can tell there's different views around this committee as well, on the rights or wrongs of individual proposals. But just as a matter of, just good administration and a government being able to secure its border, I just really must stress the point on the settled case law about what applies and what does not. The issue on legitimate expectations has been tested in court, and I know we are in whatever changes we make here, we will be safe on legitimate expectations, because being on a route is not the same as being on a promise to settlement. If it was the case that no government ever could change its rules on anyone who's currently in country, I mean, that would be a really, as I say, a coach and horses through any government's ability to run its border effectively and to respond to changing patterns of behaviour, changing public policy concerns and all the rest of it. And I just would say it would make us an outlier compared to other countries. I mean, I just did not too long ago a scan of changes in rules in other countries to which British citizens often go to work. And I mean, in almost all of the major jurisdictions where Brits go to work, the rules change and they apply to you immediately, regardless of when you came into the country. And so that is such an important principle. I just gently urge colleagues not to think about this as a sort of unusual, unheard of retrospection. What you're highlighting, and what strongly and passionately, and what is very striking about this cohort of people is the size. Right, we've never dealt with numbers of this order ever before. We've certainly never had this number of dependents either ever before, and we haven't had this level of lower skilled workers ever before either. So that is why it is big, in the sense that those numbers are big and historically never happened before, and therefore it's a complicated policy environment because of the nature of the size here. But on the legality of, can you change the rules on people whilst they're in country? Yes, you can. If you couldn't, I mean, you could say goodbye to governments being able to run their borders properly. That would be so unheard of that I just can't believe that is what people really think is the end game that they're arguing for. On legitimate expectations, as I say, that has been well tested in case law over many years. I don't want to get into a lawyer off with august lawyers on this committee, but I'd be happy to write to you about the case law that I think is most striking in this area, and where I believe we are in compliance with what would be expected of us by the courts. I'm not going to write policy here that puts me in contravention of my legal obligations, but what we are doing, or what we would propose to do, is fully in line with what the law would require of us.
I think many of the committee would accept that case law may back you up. It doesn't mean to say that we necessarily believe it's the right way to go. But
then you're making an argument for a legal change, Lord Foster, not the legality of the government's current
I'm
proposals.
not a lawyer, and I'm not going to engage in legal debate with you, because I know that... come
Home
on
Secretary,
in. Sitting desperate
I am a lawyer, a barrister, and I just wanted to make sure that you were made aware that 3 members of this committee, myself, Lady Burton, and Lady Cash, who's now a member of our shadow front bench, we actually abstained from supporting the inquiry that we've just completed on immigration, settlement and integration, because actually we entirely support your proposals. And the reason we do is it's nothing to do with having a moral compass or not, what's fair to a certain cohort of people versus others. We started that process looking at the lack of trust in the immigration system. And we believe quite strongly that the scale which you have referenced is so enormous, and the pressures on our welfare system and our public services in general has been so extraordinary. And in fact, it started well before this particular cohort, to be perfectly honest. Public services back in the 80s were far superior to now. It was a civil servant who said to me, why would I return to the UK where you pay first-class taxes for third-class services? So I just wanted to check that you knew, because it's not...
So I did look at your report, and I mean, I guess here and elsewhere these issues are contested, and there are differences of opinion. As I say, the consultation process is a genuine exercise in thinking through carefully what the right transitional arrangements are, balancing all of the different things that you would expect a government to consider when it's, working out what is in the public interest, and then coming to a settled view later this year. We hope to publish and have settled policy later in the autumn.
Just so I can assure Baroness Buscombe and put it firmly on the record, I personally made sure that the Secretary of State was already aware of what you just told her.
Oh, yes.
We move to Baroness Berridge.
Thank you. The report that we've just referenced that we published begins obviously with some very helpful definitions for those who joined the committee since that, but then goes very quickly into the questions around data and highlights major concerns around the data. And I think as the general public, they basically just want to know, do you know who's coming in, and do you know who's going out? And do you?
So I many years ago, when I was an opposition MP, made the same challenge of the Tory party when they were in government, and their answer then was not completely, and I think that would probably be the same position as it is today. That is because the way in which the data is collected doesn't necessarily here, because we don't have a biometric exit system. Of course, the EU is now doing biometrics at exit as well as entry into the EU territory, with some tech issues, but you can see where they're trying to get to. We don't have that. We have a biographic system, which is passport number and your passport details. So there are inherent vulnerabilities in a system like that, so you won't capture everything 100% of the time. The other thing that you can't sort of measure easily is, of course, the scale of irregular or illegal arrivals into the country. The small boats are a very visual thing that can be counted, but of course there are other ways of arriving in the country clandestinely which cannot be easily measured.
I know there will always be the common traveller.
Yes.
We've always got that.
And dual nationals being the other main,
using their passports either
Yes.
way. But in terms of, you've referenced the exit process, the report specifically asks for a reintroduction post, I think it was the pandemic, we paused exit checks.
Yes.
And asked you to reintroduce that, and are you going to be reintroducing that?
So I hope, I very much hope to be in a position where, again, after summer, so early autumn, there is some progress here, and we're able to start publishing that data again. Right. So I don't know why it's taken 6 years. Just fronting that with the committee, in the sense that I know the reason corporately is because 2 different systems and migrating data from the old system has taken everybody far longer than they ever thought it would. I can tell you that since we've been in government, my predecessor and myself have been chasing this one down to get those numbers back out there. But I would anticipate we're publishing in the autumn of this year.
My final follow-up on the one of the other proposals was in relation to the connection of data to administrative data, and specifically there was a recommendation about having a unique reference number. And one of the agencies that the committee suggested that linked to was the criminal justice system. Is that going to be possible? Because that, in my view, would help enormously to prevent that period of time where we have stuff on the media, who is this person, what's their status, and rumour develops, to just know by that connection of that unique reference number to the criminal justice system, who are we dealing with, what is their status, and so you've got accurate information out, subject to obviously criminal proceedings, but accurate information into the public domain.
So on CJS data, this is one of the sort of problems that in the future the National Police Service and the Home Secretary through the new powers in the bill will be able to direct the system much more carefully, because data across the CJS doesn't talk to each other, and there is a very mixed picture in terms of what different individual police forces collect as well. I think trying to fix all of that, I mean, that is a much bigger piece of work. Where I want to be is that police forces, so in this part of our forest, are able to all collect the same kind of data to the same high standard very consistently across the piece. That is not where we are today. Part of the reforms will enable us to be in that position in the future. On immigration data or status in respect of criminality, on particular cases, we Home Office provide that information as quickly as we can, in a way that, obviously we don't want to compromise any proceedings either. So usually our new practice that's been developed after the violent disorder in the summer of 2024 is to provide as quickly as possible, specifically at moment of charge, but with some discretion to go earlier if there is misinformation in the public domain that is also very damaging for public confidence as well. So I think on all of the cases that have happened since we've been in government, certainly since that summer, and learning the lessons of the speed at which information should be shared now, we move much more quickly, and that is the Home Office checking through its own immigration records as fast as it can. That is the most resilient way of being able to provide that information in the public domain. I would agree with you that what is needed across the CJS, so not just for policing, but at CPS level, and then also through the courts and into probation, is a much more unified data set that can, even if it's used for different reasons, speak to different systems. But your committee will know the challenge of getting different systems to talk to one another, and the amount of change that requires it's a very big piece of work. So, but we are, to reassure you, on the policing side, getting our house in order is one of my priorities.
Thank
Lord
you.
MP.
Secretary of State, I'm like Baroness Berridge, I'm a new member on this committee, so can I say the absence of accurate figures of course is a huge issue, because it's harder and harder to judge. But phrases, that saying that immigration has plummeted or the problem solved, it's not, because all we're talking about is net figures. The gross figures, which were the ones, if we take to March 26, there was 813,000 people came into this country. Now that included boat people and so on. That is a colossal number of people. Now, what we don't know is what their economic status and demand for public services is via the 643,000 people who left. So the net figure is totally misleading. It doesn't tell you anything about the demands on public services or the economic status of the people who have arrived. But to say that it's sorted, I mean, they used to say that the first thing a politician should learn is to know how to count. And we don't know how to count in this country and haven't done for 40 years. So I just wanted to know could you give us a timetable as to when do you think we would have information that would be of sufficient quality to be able to judge what the implications are on these colossal numbers, which is, even at this stage, 16,000 people a week?
So I mean, there's different figures in there, obviously, but let me say, just on the specific question that I know has been of interest to the committee before on exit checks and the numbers, the best proxy that's been used is numbers in and then what you know from your exit checks to work out what your potential population of overstayers is likely to be. The reason those are proxies are again, issues I think the committee knows well, because, of course, the way that the common travel area works, dual nationals, there are reasons why you can't have a definitive figure. And, of course, we are a relatively open society. We don't have a system of compulsory ID that is used to check status on a regular basis. And, the government's work on digital ID is about ease of use of public services, not, gateways to check people's status. So, that for the sort of country we are and how we run ourselves, that ability to give you like a definitive, this is exactly the number today, is not possible. What you can get is a good proxy that tells you what your population of interest is, and then also tells us what we can do in terms of immigration enforcement. So we do know when we think someone has overstayed, and then we are able to tailor immigration enforcement in that direction. Overstaying in and of itself hasn't been a big priority within immigration enforcement work before. That has changed under this government. We've obviously increased resources for immigration enforcement. I think the footprint for immigration enforcement now is going to be the biggest it's ever been, and that creates more capacity to be able to both make our very good progress on removals of foreign offenders, keep going in the right direction. Our numbers are higher than those that we inherited, to be able to do more on removals of people who are failed asylum seekers, and then also to be able to go after a bigger cohort of overstayers as well.
Thank you very much. Now, can I just say to the Secretary of State and to all colleagues, time is really up against us, so short questions, short answers for now, so we can get through everything. Since I want to ask the next one, which is about the Life in UK test, I'm not going to ask the Secretary of State a whole series of difficult questions like how old is Big Ben, questions that seem to us totally irrelevant to life in this country. So can I just ask you, Secretary of State, first of all, we've called for major reforms. You've said you're going to do something about it. Can you tell us what progress there is? And secondly, we also suggested you should look very seriously at a different way of doing it, which is the sort of support mechanisms of that they have for people who've done bad things and have been sent off to a driving offence course, and there should be similar things like that. Could you just very quickly tell us what progress is being made and what do you think of our course proposal?
So I hope to be able to update Parliament, the House, more on proposals in this area later this year. The contract for the current test, I think, runs out in autumn of next year. So there is a good moment coming up where, if we want to do things very differently, we can do. I would agree with you. I actually bought my copy, by the way, just in case I needed a quick cribbing. And then having looked at, anyway, there are...
Knowing you had, that's why I didn't ask you the questions.
I would have offered to test each of you in turn as well. But no, I think, look, I take on board the point. I would just observe, I think any system of testing, that you have got across what it is, who we are as a country, and that this is the choice you're making as you become a citizen of our country, is likely to feel a little crude, because it's not a thing that's easy to test. If you're coming to this country, you're joining a very particular kind of society with very particular norms about how we do things, and it's very hard to just get on one piece of paper the inheritance you have.
I am going to stop you,
I agree with
Secretary
that,
of State.
But we will find a better way than the way that we have at the moment.
Can I just be absolutely clear? First of all, you have said that the contract doesn't run out for a bit. It is perfectly possible, is it not, to make changes to the current questions in the current system straight away. It cannot be right to have at least 2 questions in the system where the correct answers, are actually wrong. Okay, for example, King Canute was not the first Danish king, it was Svein Forkbeard, and it is not true to say that the highest value of the UK note is £50, when if you go to Scotland you can get a £100 note. just assure us that changes are being made now.
So let me come back on the specifics of the wrong questions. I have asked, I mean, you'll be pleased to know in terms of the integrity of the test, not even the Home Secretary can see the questions. So I will have to defer to officials on the checking of the accuracy of the answers. And I'm very happy to write to the committee on those two specifics. I suspect one or two of those might be contested, though, anyway.
And seriously looking at our proposal for
Yes.
Either an alternative or something that is an optional extra, looking at courses along the side of the very successful things that are done with the driving offence people.
We are absolutely looking at proposals that have been made, previous findings from this committee and others, seriously. We're also looking to learn from other jurisdictions as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Lord Bark.
Very, very quickly, Lord Chair, because there are a couple of people who want to ask supplementaries on this question. So I've got the Immigration and Asylum Bill just been introduced. The simple question is, what's the most important impact you see this having, Home Secretary?
Well, I think that it will be crucial to helping us get some measure of control on a system that is failing very badly at the moment. Very specifically, I think that it will, with the new independent immigration appeals body, help us to get to grips with the very big problem that we see in the immigration appeal space, which is just the sheer volume of appeals, I think demands a new public policy response to be able to handle that volume. So we've seen initial decisions made much more quickly. We've got through that backlog more quickly, but everybody's just basically ending up sat in the appeals backlog instead. So I think that is, in terms of being able to more speedily decide cases and get people to point of removal, I think that is one of the biggest changes that will have an impact on this space. There's obviously other important changes on Article 8 reform, making sure human rights legislation and the development of human rights here doesn't take us beyond our international obligations. You know, we are within our international obligations, which we care about and want to maintain, but we're not going further than we need to in terms of fulfilling our obligations. So, I think there's a strong suite of measures of the ones that I think it will take some time, but the biggest impact is on immigration appeals.
Thank you.
Lord Dubs.
Home Secretary, it's a pleasure to be able to put the question to you directly as opposed to via the media. You scrapped or you suspended family reunion last autumn, and when this bill came along, I was hoping there'd be something in it to say it was coming back again. I'm talking about family reunion where there are children abroad who have family here. What's the chance of you bringing something like that back again?
We have not yet settled policy on family reunion. It remains suspended, but we have committed to settling policy on family reunion and separately on children. None of the changes we have made impact on unaccompanied minors in the country. The rest of the cohort, we've said that we will settle policy, and we expect to do so later in the year.
Thank you. And one very specific question on the bill, Lord Anderson.
Yes, thank you. You've alluded to the Independent Immigration Appeals Authority provided for in the bill, which will see judges of the first-tier tribunal replaced by adjudicators who won't need to be lawyers, although they will, of course, need to be recruited and trained.
Yes.
I know your aim, as you've said, is to increase capacity and speed up decision-making, but your published impact assessment rates the value of this change as uncertain, and the Public Law Project has said you're prioritising speed over justice. So really two questions. First, how do you answer those criticisms? And specifically, can you clarify whether these lay adjudicators will have access to legal expertise, rather as lay magistrates have a magistrate's clerk in their court, or will they just be left to get on with it?
No, they will, so I can deal with that quite quickly. Intended in exactly the same way as a situation in the magistrates' court, although of course the big difference between these adjudicators is they will be trained, so not sitting as ordinary members of the public, but recruited from a broader range of people. And then, look, I think that when you have a system that is not able to deal with claims in a speedy way, or where last-minute appeals are able to frustrate legitimate removal from the country, I'd question whether that's meaningful justice as well. So I don't accept that criticism on speed over justice, and I actually think that speed and the ability to have flex in the when it comes to the sheer scale of immigration appeals that we see is necessary to maintain justice in its broader sense, which is not just for the people who are awaiting a decision, awaiting a hearing on their appeal, but also for everybody else, who's got a public interest in knowing that the government can, remove those who have no right to be in the country, and to do so effectively and quickly without last-minute frustrations that are designed to frustrate legitimate removal from the country. So I think I reject that criticism. I think we can get the balance right. It will still be an independent chamber. We've set out in legislation the independence of the individuals that will run that and have oversight. What it does allow is for a Home Secretary to be able to ask the chamber to flex so that they can prioritise cases based on a wider public interest. That is different to the way that judges do listings in other tribunals. As a former Lord Chancellor, I would never interfere with listings for the judiciary. They have a specific set of things that they do for us constitutionally. That's not for the government. But here, when it comes to immigration appeals, I think the ability to be able to flex that system to prioritise in the public interest, to make sure you can get foreign offenders out of your jurisdiction, those public interest requirements matter more, but there will still be a legal independent underpinning, and ministers will be required to uphold the independence of this authority as well.
Thank you.
Baroness Berridge.
Yeah. When there was a private notice question, you may be aware that Lord Hanson answered on this in the House of Lords after it was in the media, because it's started its course in the House of Commons. A specific question was raised by a colleague, Lady Deach, in relation to the situation at the moment for first-tier tribunal judges, about them not having to give declarations of interest and conflicts, etc. So these independent adjudicators, will they have to list, for instance, membership of political parties, etc.? Because one can see information about people coming out afterwards nowadays on social media and saying, well, the decision was made by this person, they've got that issue, and they're now bragging on social media that they did it this way. So will we make sure that they are subject to similar requirements as we have on judiciary?
Yes, so there is absolutely a requirement to make sound, legally defensible decisions, and that requires also making sure that there isn't a conflict of interest that might call into question the legality or the procedural fairness of a decision as well. So that would apply in the same way. I don't know, forgive me, the detail of the rest of that private notice question, but I'm very happy to pick up any additional.
I think it was news to many of us that actually there weren't these requirements at the moment on first-tier tribunal judges. A lot of us who are lawyers back then couldn't quite understand that. So if you could check that we
yes,
do
no, and it will be for the
yes.
new officers of the authority to set their own procedural rules. So that won't be written by the government. It will be an independent authority, and they will have procedural rules in the same way that other chambers also have procedural rules that they have to abide by, and I am sure that will, of course, be picked up, because procedural fairness is a necessary aim of any system of adjudication. So
if you could write to us,
I will make sure that I pick up on the specifics.
But it's also the first-tier tribunals,
yes,
and particularly the issue of declarations of interest.
Yeah.
So we look forward to hearing from you. Baroness Burton.
Yes, could I ask a question on asylum hotels?
Yes.
The government has pledged to end the use of asylum hotels in this Parliament, but through the current course of rate of progress, that would be 2034. So how is that pledge going?
No, I think we're on course to meet our pledge to get out of asylum hotels by the end of the Parliament. I think there was the peak of asylum hotel usage was something like 400 at its peak. That's halved that's halved based on where we are today. It was, I believe, 213 in July 2024, and now we're down to just under 170. So we've closed one in five. I believe we're on track to make our pledge. It's a very important programme of work that's happening in the Home Office. You'll have obviously also seen the move into large sites. We've made some new announcements on new large sites that we will be using for the purposes of asylum accommodation.
That's military bases, is
yes.
that right? Okay. So essentially that rate of progress that you really do feel is going to be in the right place by the end of Parliament, that is because of the use of military bases?
Yes, combination. Obviously military bases we see as the future for asylum accommodation. We think that can have actually better impact on the ability to crowd in services on a site rather than obviously other models of providing accommodation. We've seen the stresses and strains of hotel usage specifically. So the expansion of use of military sites is very much a key plank of the government's policy in this area.
Baroness Buscombe.
Yes, very quickly. Could you reassure us and those watching this broadcast that people won't be put into houses in amongst other people living in streets and so on? Because we are talking about people who've arrived here illegally. For some reason, we don't lock them up. We allow them to live as we live. But will they just be confined to those barracks? Secondly, I won't give my source, but I know that certain members of the armed forces are deeply upset that asylum seekers are being put into far better accommodation than some of them are living in and have lived in forever. I've been to many barracks and bases, and the accommodation, the standard accommodation is utterly appalling, and I'm shocked to discover that we're actually going to repair some of this for asylum seekers. So can you reassure me that's not the case?
So, look, what I would say is we're not taking over military sites that are in active usage, or, you know, these are much of what we've announced is in the training site space. So this is not accommodation for military families that has now been upgraded to a higher standard. That is not the case, and that's not what's happened on the sites that we have taken over. It is quite basic accommodation, but what we're able to do on these sites is to grow that accommodation at scale and to have on-site provision of services that, you know, enables a better running of that part of our estate. People are not detained, so that is the difference. They're not, you know, they're not locked up. We have a detention estate that we use when we are progressing someone to removal from our country, and there are, of course, you know, strict legal safeguards there to make sure we don't unlawfully detain somebody. But whilst a claim is in process, either for an initial decision or, more likely these days, because it's sitting in an appeal queue, people are not in detained accommodation. They are able to move about their business. There is a mixed model of accommodation. So we've obviously increased use of military sites, and will increase that again in the future. There's also dispersed accommodation, and of course you'll know about the hotel situation. We were looking to have a model that can deal with the numbers that we have, do so in a way that, you know, fulfills our obligations, but also ultimately maintains both public confidence and value for money.
Could I say dispersed accommodation?
No, sorry,
is really worrying.
I'm sorry,
No,
we really have to move on.
I'm
sorry, we have to move on. Lord Dobbs.
It's a sad comment of the times that when you move people into military accommodation, the rent-a-car are coming in to demonstrate. Often from different parts of the country, they're not even local. What can you do to assure local opinion that this is not a threat to them? What can you do to assure local opinion that this is a reasonable process on the way to asylum seekers being judged as to whether they have a claim for refugee status, so that the rent-a-car people don't dominate the headlines?
I mean, look, I think there's definitely organised protest activity which is sometimes not local to an area, and is people, you know, it does represent people coming from other parts of the country. I think it would be a mistake to say that that accounts for all of the anxiety. It is also often local in nature, and you know, I've seen that in my own constituency. You know, we've had 3 asylum hotels in my patch, and the people that have expressed concern about that are my own constituents. They're not people that have been bussed in from elsewhere. So I think you're definitely right, Lord Dobbs. There is an element of some of the protest activity that is organised by the groups online, and, you know, troublemakers wanting to get together and wreak havoc if they think they can get away with it. But it would be a mistake to think that that accounts for most or all of what we're seeing. There is often, you know, as a constituency MP, I do understand the local anxiety. It isn't specific only to hotels. Obviously, where we've moved into military sites, you know, local people there have had something to say about that. With dispersed accommodation, you know, again, sometimes that also gains local. You can see local discontent there as well. So what I would say is we work closely with local authorities and with local police forces before decisions are made about where we are going to go. And once we've made decisions, because in the end, we do have to go somewhere. There's only a limited amount of land. I've got to make decisions that are sensible and mean that we can put people somewhere. That we do so in a way that still works with all of our partners, and that is an ongoing process. So it happens before decision and then after decision has been made as well.
Thank you. We're now going to move into a question which really we could have spent the whole session discussing. So it's very large, very complicated and so on. And we're clearly not going to be able to go into it in detail. So I'm going to ask Lord MP to introduce the question. A few brief remarks, Secretary of State, from you in response. I think Lord Dubs may want to come in as well. But if we can agree that we will write to you with a number of detailed questions, because this is... it is a complex issue and we need to fully understand it. But to give us a background and introduce it, Lord MP.
Secretary of State, you're well aware that the CTA Common Travel Area has been around for a century. You'll also be aware that we have a policy flowing from the Belfast Agreement that we wouldn't have any hard border on the island, albeit that we have two jurisdictions and the police on both sides of the border do intervene in certain circumstances, so it's not a completely free-for-all. We also know that you and the Irish authorities meet regularly to discuss these matters, but we've had one very disturbing case in the last few weeks. I can't say too much because it's before the courts, and this has sparked some disgraceful demonstrations, as Alf was referring to. But the problem is, depending on the ebb and flow of perhaps how European countries treat their immigration situation, if they decided to tighten things up, then water will flow to the easiest point, and there have been cases from both jurisdictions where people have been abusing the system to come illegally into the United Kingdom or vice versa. It's only, I think, a year or two ago that the people in Republic were complaining that people were coming from our jurisdiction into their jurisdiction, and they have a huge problem with immigration right now, and it's a big issue for them. So could you maybe update us briefly on what you're doing, and if necessary, as the Chair says, write to us with the latest? Because what we don't want to do is to start trying to unravel arrangements that we've had for 100 years, which have worked well. And I might just point out that at the beginning of COVID, there was an issue over the importation of, was it vaccines or something, and the Irish Republic overnight decided they were going to ban it and check things at the border, and then within a few hours they withdrew that because there was such a reaction. So could you maybe update us, Secretary of State, where we are?
Yes, thank you for that. And we could indeed have spent the whole session on these particular matters. Just to reassure the committee, I've discussed the shared problems and issues that we have in relation to the Common Travel Area with my Irish counterpart. We've discussed this on a number of occasions. We will discuss again. What I would reiterate, though, is that the lack of specific checks doesn't mean to say there's no border security at all. So I just want to reassure the committee this isn't some sort of gap or loophole that no one's doing anything about at all. It is a shared problem for us and the Irish. We are absolutely committed, as are they, to maintain the uniqueness of the arrangements between the Republic, Northern Ireland, and then mainland Great Britain as well. That reflects, obviously, the history and heritage and the Troubles and the Good Friday Agreement, as well as, of course, as you say, this goes back longer than all of that. So we want to respect our arrangements. It is the problems that we see both on our side and on the Irish side are shared problems, and we have very much a view that we should look for solutions together, and that is what we are doing. Most of our efforts here, and you'll forgive me for not going into too much detail because there are operational consequences, but what we look at is operational cooperation between us and our Irish counterparts, and also having an intelligence-led approach. We know quite a lot about how movements take place from Ireland into the UK and vice versa, and also how movements take place on the island of Ireland itself. So this is something that both us and the Irish have a good sense of, and we are very much working together on it. And I do think between the intelligence-led approach and the operational cooperation, we can bear down on some of these issues.
Thank you. We'll chase that up in more detail.
Yes.
We move on to one other border issue. Lord Dobbs.
Yes, thank you, Lord Chairman. Look, as you know, Home Secretary, this committee looked at EES. We went to Dover, went to Folkestone, we went to St Pancras, and we warned the previous government there was going to be a bit of chaos. And we're seeing the chaos now. The system is not working. Various different EU countries are operating a different system. It's not working at St Pancras, really, and we had people missing their flights in Italy coming back here. What can we do to resolve this muddled situation?
Just to reassure the committee, I've discussed the new juxtaposed controls based on the EU's new policy for its member states on exit checks. I've discussed it with my French counterpart directly. I've also discussed it directly with the Commission as well. You would expect the government to have made points about the need to maintain fluidity at the border. That is exactly what we have been pushing for. For what it's worth, I mean, this is not our system, it's the EU system, but the French are not the only ones that have tech issues as they migrate to the new system across the whole of the EU. There have been problems in the other countries as well. Some of that has affected British citizens. But just to reassure the committee, we are very alive to those risks. And one of the first things I did when I came into post was I had a bilateral with my French counterpart, and this was very much on the radar. We think the French have also prioritised fluidity at the border for what it's worth, and they've found them very helpful on this matter. But of course, they now have a set of obligations at EU level and a set of regulations that they have to follow. We will obviously be arguing for a pragmatic approach whilst tech systems catch up with where the EU wants its new regulations to be. It's not in our direct control, but I can assure you that we are absolutely pressing that point.
Thank you. Can I, just one final point on that very particular issue. During the implementation phase of the scheme, which, as you know, took very many years, but once it started, there was the ability of people on the ground to say, look, there's too much of a queue here, we're just suspending the system.
Yeah.
Could you just bring us up to speed with what agreement you now have got with the European authorities about the ability of our ports, where relevant, and railway stations, to be able to suspend the system if there are large queues? We can't obviously do it for when people arrive in other countries, but we could do it here.
So, I mean, look, this is where it is a matter for the EU. They have a new posture on their expectations of their member states and compliance, which has created less room for manoeuvre for the French, for example, to be able to prioritise border fluidity. We obviously continue to make the case to the Commission and everybody else that whilst you know that there are tech issues, a pragmatic suspension of requirements for peak periods would be a sensible way forward for everybody.
Just so I can be clear what you're saying. You understand there are all the stories about what's going to happen, for example, at Dover during the summer holidays. At the moment, you're saying that currently the EU authorities are now being much tighter about the ability of people at Dover to say we're going to suspend the system because we want to get people through and reduce the queues, and you are negotiating to try and get that flexibility back. Would that be a quick summary of what you said?
Yes, so the flexibility, I believe, ends in September, though you're testing the bounds of my knowledge of EU regulations, but I believe the flexibility ends in September, and at that point there's no flexibility to prioritise border fluidity. We are asking, and we are suggesting that there is an extension of that, because these issues are not... It's not obvious that they will be resolved by then.
But it's also not obvious that the suspension is going to be as easy as people initially thought, given all the fears about this summer, which is before the February end of the light touch approach.
Yes, we are still, look, wherever... at the highest levels in the EU and with ministers of the interior, including the French, but others as well, we have prioritised and asked for border fluidity to be maintained. It is in everybody's interest, not just ours, but for EU member states as well, that you don't get pinch points around holidays, but also that their tech has a chance to catch up with its requirements so that it can meet this demand in the future. So I think we have a shared interest. There is a view about the flexibility and how it should be maintained. We're pushing for maximum flexibility.
Thank you very much. And Secretary, more generally, thank you very much. You've given very detailed, comprehensive answers to a large number of questions. We're enormously grateful to you. There's a number of areas where you've agreed you will write to us. Yes. Not least, you're going to get rid of the Life in the UK test and replace it with a whole series of courses that people can go through, which is great news to hear.
Quite say that,
no,
but
maybe. Well, you got close. At least you showed interest in it. But we're very genuinely very grateful, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Order. The session is now ended.